Try to talk about very interesting topic today about whether goyim, whether non-Jews are able to perform mitzvahs. Is there a value to their mitzvahs? Does it depend on which type of mitzvahs? And just to explain, obviously the value of a mitzvah is different than the value of an ha-metzuvah. One who's obligated and performs the mitzvah, that is a different level of a mitzvah. It's not really comparable in the level of what that mitzvah accomplishes, but we see in the Gemara that there's also a concept of an ha-metzuvah, so one who's not obligated, yet if they go ahead and perform the mitzvah, then there's accomplishment to it. There's schar, there's some reward for that mitzvah.
Is that for Jews only or for anybody?
Oh, so that's the question we're going to try to get into today. Is that applicable to non-Jews? Now, to open up the topic, I think where we have this familiar idea is by nashim, is by women, right? By women, they have an exemption that covers a bunch of mitzvahs that they're pater from mitzvahs hasei shehazman grama. They're pater from time-bound positive commandments, and therefore, min Torah they're pater from shofar and from lulav, etc. And nevertheless, we find this idea that women who would like to do the mitzvah, they can do the mitzvah, and they receive reward for it. So it's not an obligation. They're coming on their own and volunteering, so to speak, deciding that they would like to do it. And we find that we don't say, since they're not obligated, therefore there's no point of it. We say that they're accomplishing, they're doing a mitzvah. It's not the same requirement as a man. It's not a requirement. It's not the same level as a man. It's mitzvah because they're not obligated, but there's value to their mitzvahs. And the question is this also something that we can apply to a non-Jew that performs a mitzvah? It sounds a little funny at first to have a non-Jew put on tzitzis or put a mezuzah on their door. Sounds a little funny, but let's see if we could try to delve into this topic. So maybe a more pointed way to bring out this question is there's a Gemara Yerushalmi, rather well-known Yerushalmi, that the Gemara says that called pater min hadar v'yisehu nikra hedyot, that anyone who's pater, exempt from a particular mitzvah, and they do it anyway, they're called a hedyot. So a hedyot means like a simple person, meaning not a bright person, basically it's a derogatory term. It's a negative thing. And that is a whole topic in itself. A lot of things that we'll discuss today are topics in themselves. We won't be able to cover all of them, but what exactly is that talking about? We know that there's many areas of mitzvahs where even though there's no strict obligation, it's considered very praiseworthy to go ahead and do it. So there's a lot of different exceptions to that rule. One of them is brought out by the Rishonim in Maseches Kedushin, who ask that how can they see from the Gemara that women are able to do mitzvahs and receive reward for mitzvahs, but they're exempt. So how does that fit with the Yerushalmi? The Yerushalmi says that those who are exempt from mitzvah and come to do it anyway, they're not accomplishing anything, and it's a silly thing to do. So the Rambam explains that there's a difference. The case of Yerushalmi, that's talking about when anybody who would be in that situation would have an exemption. For example, one case in Yerushalmi is a chassan. Chassan is a groom on the night of his wedding. It's a little hard to understand why the chassan has to have an exemption from Kriyat Shema, but the chassan, at least according to the opinion that's being dealt with over there, has an exemption with Kriyat Shema. Maybe 2 points that are necessary in understanding why a groom, Chazal removed his chiyuv in Kriya Shema is number one, is that grooms used to be much more nervous for reasons beyond the scope of today. They were very, very preoccupied, nervous about their wedding. And number two is that people used to have kavanah more. And therefore they were, it was completely different when they were in that very, very nervous state. And therefore, Chazal said that a chassan is pater from Kriya Shema. Not applicable nowadays, but that's what it says over there. And therefore, a chassan who goes ahead and performs a mitzvah of Kriya Shema, the Yerushalmi says that's a silly thing to do. So the Ramban says, why is that different than the women who go ahead and perform mitzvah even though they're exempt? So Ramban explains that anyone in that situation of being so preoccupied, the way that anyone who would be preoccupied like a groom would be pater. Anyone in that situation would be pater. They would have an exemption. Women are not. They don't have a particular. It's not that they have an exemption. It's that they're not obligated. They're not included in the group that's obligated. There's no particular situation that women are in that makes it that they're always have any specific exemption. They just were never included in that mitzvah. They were never included in the obligation. So if they want to decide that they're going to include themselves, so they're including themselves in the obligation. They're not in any particular circumstance which would not which would always be exempt. So therefore, it's not like they're adding a mitzvah, right? If a person is a chassan, every single person who's in the situation of being a chassan is pater, because of the situation, because of that matzah, that being preoccupied the way that a chassan is. But women they just never were included in the chiyuv.
Well,
So
was it that they were never included in the obligation, or that they were never included, it was never even contemplated that they would do it voluntarily?
they were never included in the obligation. They could do it voluntarily.
Okay.
So and therefore there's no problem with them doing it voluntarily. It's not like they don't have any particular exemption which makes it that they're doing a mitzvah in any circumstance which nobody would do it, which no one would have that mitzvah. So the question is, how could we apply this to non-Jews and say a similar type of idea? That non-Jews never had an obligation in mitzvahs, but if they want to come and do it on their own, then maybe they can accomplish a mitzvah. So that's the question.
If they're Bnei Noach, is that a different category also?
So we're talking about Bnei Noach. Typically,
versus someone who wants to be a ger.
yeah. So
Is there a difference between the two?
Well, a ger tzedek is a full-fledged Yisrael, so they have the regular same mitzvahs as every other yid. So
No, I'm talking about Bnei Noach with kavanah to become a Jew. He's in the process of converting.
So in the process of converting, that would just be like a question of how to train him properly for his conversion.
Oh, okay.
But in the
Same status.
it would be the same. It would be the same status in terms of is there schar for that mitzvah? Is there something that's really being accomplished, or is it just we're training him how to be a Jew? When he'll be a Jew, then he'll accomplish mitzvahs.
Mm-hmm.
It applies. Bnei Noach is usually a term that's referred to that of non-Jews who accept to keep those mitzvahs of Bnei Noach, of the Zion mitzvahs. But really, it'll be a question even for one who's not at that commitment. Is there any value to their mitzvahs? So I think we have to try to break up the different types of mitzvahs in order to narrow down this question. Right, you have some mitzvahs which are mitzvahs, what the Rishonim call mitzvah sichliyos. They're mitzvahs that the seichel is mechayev, that a person should understand even without sichliyos.
Sichliyos.
Comes from seichel, meaning you could figure them out just with your seichel. You don't need a commandment in order to know them. Right, a bunch of the Zion mitzvahs Bnei Noach are often like that. Right, Gezel is something which is considered That's a person should know. A person should know that just from their seichel, just from being by virtue of the fact that they're a human being, a healthy human being, should have that sense that stealing is something which is wrong, or murder is something which is wrong. Even if the Torah wouldn't command it, that's something that they should know. So there's actually
already Cain got in trouble.
Right, exactly. And the Chizkuni actually in this past week's parsha asked the question. I mean, we see the whole Dora Mabel got in trouble, and the way the Chizkuni understands, they didn't yet have mitzvahs. The mitzvahs were not commanded in
They
those
weren't
mitzvahs
Bnei
yet.
Noach, because that was before that altogether.
Right. So that's Chizkuni asked, what they got this terrible punishment. The whole world was wiped out. What happened over here? And the Chizkuni makes this distinction and says that the mitzvahs, the averos that they were doing, the sins that they were committing, those were things which are seichel is mechayev them. Those are things that a person should know even without any commandment. Just a human being understands. Just by being a human being, you understand that those things are wrong, and that's why they were punished. There seems to be a discussion: is that really something which they're obligated in, or is it something that they just ought to keep? But any which way you cut it, I think it's pretty clear that mitzvah sichliyos are things which there is value for non-Jews to do them. So, for example, chesed, the Zion mitzvahs is a separate category, because the Zion mitzvahs they're obligated to keep, right? The seven mitzvahs, 7 Noahide laws, they're obligated to keep. But even besides those laws, let's say the idea of chesed, right? Helping another person, giving tzedakah, charity to positive causes. Let's say not talking badly about someone, lashon hara, not harassing one with words, insulting someone, hating. All these ideas, probably ahavas Hashem, yiras Hashem. These are mitzvah sichliyos, right? These are things that a person could understand without having the commandment, and seems to be a discussion how obliged non-Jews are to keep it. But one thing is for sure, that there seems to be certainly a value and a reward that they will receive for that category of mitzvahs. Another mitzvah that seems to be included in that category is kibbud av v'em. Kibbud av v'em is also a mitzvah which is sichliyistic. It's something that should be a natural product of being a human being. There's an interesting Rambam. The Rambam says that when a ger is megayer, right, so the Rambam deals with the question, do they have a mitzvah of kibbud av v'em for their parents? What's the question?
Are they still their parents?
Right. So we have the idea that gerish and isgayer is kakatan shno adami. It's like they were reborn. A ger is like they were reborn.
What if the parents convert also?
That would be a good question also. But the Rambam's dealing first with a case where
Just the child.
yeah, at first glance it should be the same, because everyone's new people, so they're still not. I mean, it's still not his parents anymore halachically. So the Rambam deals with the question: is there a mitzvah of kibbud av v'em? And the Rambam says that there is. Halachically, it's not considered their parents anymore. Says the Rambam, shelo yomru, that people shouldn't say that they went from kedusha chamura to kedusha kala. Shouldn't say that this person, he was in a higher state when they went from a higher level when they were not Jewish to a lower level than they were Jewish. Meaning that when they were not Jewish, they were honoring their parents, and now they're going to become Jewish, and now now they don't honor their parents. So we might know, well, the reason they're not honoring them anymore is because it's not considered their parents anymore. But people don't know that. Not everyone understands that, and therefore, says the Rambam, they're obligated to still honor their parents and not be mevazeh and not disgrace their parents in any way, because of this concern that it should not look like a person became Jewish and lowered their status. So what do you see from this Rambam? It sounds like the assumption is that non-Jews are honoring their parents. Right? It sounds like we assume the average non-Jew is honoring their parents. because that's why they're going to have this taina that, oh, he used to honor his parents and now he converted and he doesn't honor his parents. So it sounds like non-Jews honor their parents. So again, we see this idea that at least there's a Milah to it, something which is possibly an expectation for this category of mitzvahs. But there's still
if
one.
non-Jews, in their original status as non-Jews, are honoring their parents, it's not necessarily because they think there's some commandment. They just, they do it for whatever reason, benefit of society. They're grateful, whatever.
Exactly. That's exactly the point. That mitzvah sichliyos, they don't even need to know that it's a particular mitzvah. They don't need to know that it's one of the 613. It's just something that seichel is mechayev. It's something that the human morale, that a person should feel that is the correct thing to do, as long as they're a regular healthy human being. So that takes one category of mitzvahs, but that still doesn't help us for other all the mitzvahs. That's not we can't learn from there that there's value to a non-Jew taking lulav and esrog, sitting in a sukkah listening to a shofar. So we still have to get to that category.
Value in terms of improving their life or their way of thinking, or value in terms of getting a divine reward?
I would imagine that it would be both. Meaning, if there's a value to the mitzvah, so that would mean that they get a reward for it, and we understand that any mitzvah which is performed and has a status of a mitzvah does refine the person. So, seemingly it would have both of those effects if it was in fact a mitzvah. One other category where we know already very clearly that non-Jews are included in this mitzvah is the idea of korbanos. The Gemara in Chullin, elsewhere also tells us that, makes a drasha that non-Jews are eligible to make voluntary offerings. They can designate a particular animal and have it be brought, and it will be brought in the Beis HaMikdash. Right. Right. So we see that there's a value to their korbanos. We're even able to bring it onto our own altar. So that's another case where we see that there is value to. So that category is pretty clear that there's value to that type of a mitzvah. Other places where we see that there's clearly value to their mitzvahs. There's a Gemara that says that a non-Jew who is osik b'Torah is similar to the Kohen Gadol. And he has such an elevated status that he's like the Kohen Gadol. He's learning Torah. Now, that needs to be limited because that Gemara asks a question that this is the Gemara in Sanhedrin. The Gemara asks, "What do you mean he's like the Kohen Gadol?" It says that a non-Jew. It says elsewhere that a non-Jew who is osik b'Torah is chayiv misa. He's eligible to the death penalty for learning Torah. And the Gemara says, why is he not allowed to learn Torah? The Gemara says, Morasha Kilas Yaakov. It's like the Gemara has two pshatim, but the basic pshat is that it's like Zela. He's stealing the Torah. The Torah was only given to Klal Yisrael.
Cultural appropriation.
Right. What was that?
Cultural appropriation.
Right. Exactly. Right. So that's one. The Gemara says also another pshat that maybe it's similar to an act of immorality because the Jewish nation is so to speak married to it. But anyway, the point is the Gemara has that contradiction, and the Gemara answers that when is it of value for them to learn Torah? That's to learn about the Seven Noahide Laws. That's where it's a great value, and it's like they're the Kohen Gadol. But to learn about things which are not relevant to them, to learn about the other mitzvahs, that would not be not only would it not be a mitzvah, but it would be a terrible aveira. So that's another category where we have very clear sources about what's included. A non-Jew studying the halachos of the Noahide laws and seemingly any of the other laws which pertain to them is a very great value, and they receive great reward for it. And studying the things which do not pertain to them is not only is it not a mitzvah, but it's actually an avera.
I mean, you have professors that they study ancient cultures, so they sometimes would include ours, and they would get into it fairly deeply in terms of the subject matter.
Yeah, I think that probably that usually won't be a problem.
That's for information, not necessarily so they would do it.
Yeah, they're studying culture. They're probably not gonna. They're probably not really considered learning the Torah. Usually that type of, from my understanding, it's usually more of a cultural study than a actual Torah study.
So even if they look at Torah sources, but they're doing it b'Torah's not Torah, it's still not considered. It wouldn't be considered learning Torah.
That would be an interesting question. You're saying what if they want to look at Torah sources, but not because they're trying to study Torah, but just because they want to study academically as a professor.
Yeah.
They're not actually trying to learn the Torah as a mitzvah. So I think we'll see a source soon that might support this idea that Chaim's saying, that maybe that would be different. Try to get to that very soon.
My cousin in Harvard, Yaakov Goldberger.
Sure.
So he said that in one of his classes they brought like Reb Shimon Shkop or something. Like there's some like Rosh Hashiva, and like they actually had the source there.
Right. Yeah, it would depend how it's being studied, but we'll get to a source that seems to maybe shed light on that question. So. So I think we covered a bunch of categories which are very clear. Things that basically don't seem to be clear, right? We have mitzvah sichliyos. There's clearly a value, possibly even more than a value. There's things which are korbanos and things like that, which are included. Keeping Shabbos, which is clearly not included. That I didn't get to. That's the next topic. We also have that a nachri sheshavas, an akum who keeps Shabbos, a non-Jew who keeps Shabbos. The Gemara says there also that he's chayiv misa. So,
who would kill that person?
So the Rambam actually says that we don't actually kill them, even at the time when the Bezdin is in function. There's not actually Mises Bezdin on it. That's only for the 7 mitzvahs themselves. But what it means is that they're bidei shemayim in the heavenly court. They're chayiv misa for keeping Shabbos. So those are the things that are dealt with explicitly. The things
you have people that they will go a day or two and it might coincide with Shabbos that they shut off their cell phone, they shut off their computer.
Yes.
They try to clear their minds.
Yeah, so that's a whole nother big topic in itself. We can't get into all the details of that, of what's considered keeping Shabbos. Was what you're describing keeping Shabbos? He's just taking off from work. Probably not. It needs to be something more significant than that.
Has to be the same Shabbos?
So that's a machlokas between Rashi and the Rambam. Whether it was Shem Menucha Ba'alma is considered included in Nachri Shavas or not. But this is a very big topic on its own. So let's keep that out. So these are all ruled out, all these categories. And what we have remaining is, what about all the rest of the mitzvahs? All the rest of the things that we do, putting on Tefillin, putting on tzitzis, listening to shofar, sitting in a sukkah, right, putting a Mezuzah on our door. Do these mitzvahs have any value by non-Jews? We know, like we said at the beginning, women perform a lot of these mitzvahs, and we know that they are makabel schar for them, even though they're not obligated. Is there such a value for non-Jews performing these types of mitzvahs?
Yeah, it makes them better people. No?
That's the question. Does it make them better people, or is it just not relevant to them at all? It's only if it's a mitzvah, right? Let's bring out the question this way: women are not obligated, but they are included in the Jewish nation. and the Jewish nation has the mitzvahs. So it's easier to say that they could, so to speak, bring themselves into the mitzvah, voluntarily perform the mitzvah. But would we say that by a non-Jew that there's any value for them to shake a lulav or to sit in a sukkah? They're not part of the nation who received the Torah.
I mean,
So-
maybe it's an alternative activity for them. Whereas if they weren't doing this, they would be beating each other up in some bar or whatever it is.
So
that's where they play football.
So
Ex-
Charlie Kirk,
exactly.
Charlie Kirk, a devout Christian, used to keep Shabbos.
Yes.
And he learned it from the Jews, and he would not put the phone away and
Yeah, so
talk
maybe-
about if there was a benefit to it.
Yeah, so maybe another time we'll have to do a case study on Charlie Kirk and see if he was included in Nachri Shabbos or not.
But I think he did.
That's a
right?
great
I think they also did sundown. I think they mimicked us. They did sundown to sundown.
Yeah.
Yes.
But it's very likely that for a non-Jew, their Shabbos would actually be morning and night, starting Shabbos morning, right? Because meaning
Yeah.
for Jews, the day starts the night before.
Yeah, well,
Right.
it depends. It depends what they're trying to do. Are they trying to imitate, or they're just trying to do it in their own terms?
Right, but according to many,
Yeah.
that's the class of that for Mobile Temple, right? And that's one of the H's they say is to do Milah on Friday night, I guess.
Or any time Shabbos, right? Exactly.
Right, the
No,
people.
not anytime on Shabbos.
Why?
That's Goshen Mobile Temple. So he's a suffix. So the Shabbos.
Oh, you're talking about a
suffix.
suffix.
Somebody's a suffix. Let's say it's the case with somebody who's a suffix. So then the question is, what do they do? So then,
The people
Seven
that are
Noahide
living
Laws.
between Rosenfeld and Dina Cohen
yeah.
or Dina Hasten they're Seventh-day Adventists, okay?
But they
So-
drive.
Yeah, I know,
That's a
so
violation right
it's a
there.
different set of rules, but they
Right there,
consider
no question
Saturday
about
to
it.
be their Sabbath.
Because
Interesting.
driving violating Shabbos,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, they,
But more directly to your point about is there tachlis? So I was just when I was in Hilchos Mezuzah, I was looking at. So we discussed Mezuzah might be something different because we're afraid that maybe it won't be
You're gonna
recorded
be
by
Mezuzah,
respect.
right?
So then there's a question of Mishum Eva. So I think it's the Maril says that if an Andrew requests, you shouldn't give them, and you should explain to them that the entire protection only works for somebody who's commanded in it. So like he said, this is a way of, and he said we have Masorah. He says there's a tradition that people that when you explain it in this way, then it will not, it won't cause any Eva. He says the protection only works, but.
Very interesting.
so I used to live in Alaska, and I was in a logging camp, and the logging camp nearby was run by Seventh-day Adventists. And the loggers used to joke that on a Saturday they would not do anything, and if a whole bunch of logs went out to the ocean, they would just watch them go away, and they'd laugh about these crazy Seventh-day Adventists. It sounded, it sounded like it could have been Shomer Shabbos.
Wow. Okay, so this sounds like a topic we have to delve into another time about Nachri Shabbos, about a non-Jew keeping Shabbos, what the parameters are of that. But just to try to finish up this topic, there is a Rambam in a few different places which seems to indicate this strange idea that there's value to a non-Jew performing mitzvahs. There is a Rambam in Hilchos Milah where the Rambam says that seems to say that that he's talking about whether a Jewish person, a Moel, can perform a Milah for a non-Jew, and the Rambam seems to say that if it's being done for the purpose of the mitzvah, then it's permitted. And the question is, like, what is the value of doing for a mitzvah? Does non-Jew have a mitzvah Milah? Obviously, they don't have the obligation of mitzvah of Milah. So the Kesef Mishnah says the Rambam must mean that if it's talking about a non-Jew who's planning on converting.
Or he could be talking about Muslims because there were a lot around there and they had some degree of connection to Milah.
So that's an important point. That I think maybe you're referring to the idea of Bnei Keturah. The Rambam has an opinion that Bnei Keturah, who are not actually Jewish, a particular group is chayiv in the mitzvah of Milah. Regular Yishmaelim are not included in the mitzvah of Milah, even according to the Rambam. But that much I don't think they're going to say that the Rambam specifically talking about Bnei Keturah, because he doesn't say anything about it. It
I mean,
sounds like
regular Yishmaelim, they have a tradition of doing Milah. Whether they're obligated according to our standards or not is a whole other question.
right. So the Rambam's going according to our standards, and according to our standards, there would be no different than any other non-Jews. So that's what the Kesef Mishnah says. But if you look in the Rambam in his tshuva, in his tshuva's parador and Simon Samach, he says that he says pretty clearly that the reason why one is allowed to do it is because they do get a mitzvah. They don't have the schar of a mitzvah osa, but the Rambam says they have the mitzvah of an mitzvah osa. The Rambam is talking about the mitzvah of Milah, and the Rambam is talking about someone who's not converting, and the Rambam is still saying that if they're doing it for a mitzvah, then there is a value to that. It's a very hard thing to understand. Kesef Mishnah felt the need to put this into the Rambam because it's really not so understandable, but that's what the Rambam seems to say over there. Rav Moshe Feinstein has a tshuva also where he cannot wrap his head around such an idea. He says that it cannot be true. The Rambam, of course, only means like the Kesef Mishnah. It means Geras. I don't know if he had that tshuva. He didn't quote it. But Rav Moshe Feinstein has a long piece on this where he goes in and basically says it's an impossibility. It can't be that there's value to non-Jews doing this. If you look further though, the Rambam seems to indicate this in a couple other places also. There's a Mishnah in Trumas at the end of the third parak where the Mishnah says that a non-Jew who takes Trumas and Truma, his mafresh Truma, then his Truma is considered a good Truma. So Rashi says the reason that it works is it's a product of the non-Jew's ability to be makdish korbanos, to bring korbanos. That just like they're included in korbanos, they could bring Truma. The Rambam, if you look in the Peirush and Mishnayos, he says a different shot. He says that the reason why the Truma works is because even though they're not obligated in a mitzvahs, if they decide to do mitzvahs, then it has a shem mitzvah to it. It's considered a mitzvah. It's an accomplished mitzvah. So the Rambam seems to be saying that there is a value to their mitzvahs. So this is there seems to also be a source in Chazal that would indicate that there is such value to this. The Midrash Rabbah in Koheles says that Lashed Lavo in the end of days Hashem is going to go and say that anyone who did not eat pork, they come and get schar. And the Midrash says that many of the umos ha'olam, of the other nations of the world, are going to come and get schar. And then the Midrash continues and talks about more mitzvahs that were only kept by the Jews. But before that, it sounds like there's some type of value for the non-Jew not to eat chazer. Seems to be some support to this idea, a strange idea, right? Chazer is not a mitzvah sichliyos. The Rambam says it's a chok. And nevertheless, the Midrash seems to be saying that there's some value to that.
Do they have to be conscious that they're getting schar, or does it matter?
Oh, very good. So, if you look in where the Rambam talks about the particular idea of non-Jews doing mitzvahs in Hilchos Malachim, so the Rambam says that Bnei Noach shirotza lasos mitzvah mishar mitzvahs haTorah kedei lekabel schar. He wants to do one of the mitzvahs of the Torah in order to be makabel schar. So the Radvaz, and this touches on Chaim's point also, and touches on your point, explains that what this means is like this. It seems to be you need to have the middle kavanah in order for it to be appropriate. On one hand, it can't be that he thinks that he's obligated. If he thinks that he's obligated, says the Radvaz, then it's usher. That's number one. Number two is that he can't be that he's just doing it as a customary thing, not in order to be makabel schar, not because he believes that it's an action that has value to it. Rambam says himself that if the guy would be getting the Milah just for a health purpose, that would not be considered a mitzvah of Milah for him, even within his standard of getting a mitzvah of like an mitzvah ba'osa. So it's this in-between ground where there's a value to it, where he says, I know that there is a value to it because I know that they're obligated. I know I'm not obligated, but I would like to voluntarily also do this positive action. And that's where the Rambam says that there is a value to that mitzvah. I mean, he says that he wants to do it. He wants to do a kedei l'kabel schar. Ein monin oso lasos oso kehilchasa. We do not prevent him from doing it. We allow him to do it. So Rav Moshe Feinstein, who's very, very adamant that this cannot be a true concept. So he says it doesn't mean that there's a value to his mitzvah. It just means we don't prevent him. But he doesn't actually accomplish anything, as Rav Moshe Feinstein says. But
except something utilitarian, like like it really is for health.
Yeah, but according to what seems to come out from other possibly the simple learning in the other Rambams, and the Rambam and the Tshuva, is that the Rambam would mean that there's actual schar to this mitzvah. So I'll end off really just on a
Can I just get this reminds me, when I was converting, I was encouraged to do a lot of things, but I was told not to do everything. I was told to dafka break one thing, and that sort of speaks to the point of it was pedagogic. I was learning, but it wasn't chiyuv.
Very good. So that's that idea, right? That a person should know that they don't have the obligation until they actually become Jewish. Yeah. Right, exactly. So that gets to the end of this topic. It just, at the end of the day, I don't know how to explain it. And you have Rav Moshe Feinstein who says, like, how do you have such an idea? Like, he says it's pashut. And Rav Moshe, you see when he's confident about something, it doesn't matter what sources they bring him. He has a meiri, which sounds like he's saying explicitly. He says it's a Torah sofer. He says that the kesef misha, and then he brings this Rabbah. The Rabbah seems to be clear like this. This Rabbah is very hard. The Rabbah is right here on the Rambam, which, just the background is the Rabbah is a very old sefer, but we only got the manuscript pretty recently. And the Rabbah comments on this Rambam, and he says that if he's doing it for a Kabbalah schar, so then he says he's like an ha-metzuvah. The Rabbah seems to say pretty clearly he's like an ha-metzuvah. And then the Rabbah says, but if he wants to do something which has kedusha to it, like Tefillin or Mezuzah, he says that I'm not comfortable with. There, I think we have to be careful, not to allow them to possess dvarim shebekdusha. Right, but it sounds like the idea that they're accomplishing something. It sounds like he is comfortable with. He's nervous, like Rabbi mentioned before. The idea we have in Hilchos Mezuzah that, and it would be he's extending also to Sefer Torah and Tefillin. We don't want them having Kisvei Kodesh, because it could be a bizayon. It could be a disgrace to the way that they treat the Kisvei Kodesh. But it sounds like inherently there would be some value to them putting on Tefillin. That's what it sounds like, and Rav Moshe says, like, I don't have to deal with new manuscripts that came out. I'm not responsible for this. It's pashut. There's no mitzvahs by goyim, and that's it. And you see also the Chazon Ish. This is really the mainstream. As someone on the street, this is really the mainstream view. Like Rav Moshe assumed, and like the Chazon Ish has a piece where he says, like, kidding me? Like, you think that there's any value for a non-Jew to put on tefillin or a non-Jew to sit in a sukkah? Chazon Ish says, like, that's pashut. Of course there's no value to that. And then you have these sources which are implying like this. I'll just end off with a question that bothers me. I would think that there would be a distinction between a mitzvah which the entire mitzvah only makes sense if you are part of the nation that had those experiences. Meaning, for a non-Jew to put to sit in a sukkah or to eat matzah, right? They're not part of the nation that experienced those experiences which created those mitzvahs.
Right. Anything that's sichliyos mitzrayim.
Right. Anything which is right. Exactly. Anything those are much harder for me to understand.
Well, Shabbos is sometimes sichliyos mitzrayim itself.
Right. That's true also. But the idea, like we say in Kiddush, right? But the idea that a non-Jew could perform the mitzvah, like the Rambam examples here, that he could perform the mitzvah of bringing a korban, the mitzvah of giving tzedakah, these are the examples that the Rambam has over here. Those things are already more understandable. Yeah. He's accomplishing something. But what the Radvaz is talking about, that he's going to wear tefillin, like he's going to put on these parchments that say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem.
Yeah.
What is Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem
Full-fledged
Echad? What does it have to do with him?
Or like shotness.
Right. Well, what is the value to that? So I didn't find this distinction really anywhere, but it's something that I'm bothered by. It would seem to me like to be a very clear distinction.
Doesn't the Nefesh HaChaim talk about how the actual act itself is what's important, and it's aside from me being the one doing it, the fact that the act is being done in the world causes whatever kedusha or something.
Meaning besides for where meaning not
it
just
doesn't
where it
necessarily
came
benefit me or I
It
get
also-
So this
power.
is-
It's
so-
tikkun.
it also-
It's a tikkun.
right.
It's a
It's
tikkun.
Right. So this was I think Rabbi Berkowitz has Ravitza Berkowitz
Yeah.
maybe says something about this, that this would maybe shed light on the question that I'm asking, is it that there's a value to eating matzah because we left Mitzrayim with matzahs, or we left Mitzrayim with matzahs because in the Bria,
Right.
in the
That's
creation
Beis
before that, right?
Beis Levi says it. Hasten's very fond of this Beis Levi. This is only hechatimsa to get to the mitzvah.
Right.
But even the Nefesh
Right.
Chaim, I believe he only says that. That's the difference between a yid. Gufa says that's the difference between a yid and only a yid neshama could be pile.
Oh, so it doesn't even.
Meaning you're right. It's the act itself, but there's a
Right.
t'nai kadol l'maisa that has to be.
You can't like have a robot dude.
Right. Exactly. My sukkah. That's why I'm from
Right.
sukkah. You know.
That's okay. Yeah.
Right.
All
Okay,
right.
shkoyach. Everyone have a good day.
Shkoyach.